following video is sponsored by Shut Up and Paint My Miniatures via the Painting Partner Program. You can check them out at facebook.com/SUAPMM, that's short for Shut Up and Paint My Miniatures, or by clicking the link in the video description alone.
We work so you can play.
Matthew here from MiniWarGaming.com, and it's time for another Shadows in the Warp. Yes, I know it has been a while since I have done one of these, and to be honest, it's probably going to continue to be a sporadic show, just kind of doing it whenever interesting stuff comes up for Tyranids, or I have time to do it, or whatever it happens to be. But of course, we have a lot of new Tyranid releases, so I thought it would be good to both start up the show again for a little while, just while we cover those new releases and the new tactics and the new meta that is going to come out because of that, and also to do a few battle reports that will show off the new units. Of course, you're going to see them forever after in other battle reports that feature Tyranids, but I just want to do some that specifically try to feature these new models and how they might work in synergistically fashion against other models as well in the Tyranid Codex. I'm very excited for this. I was not expecting these new Tyranid releases. Today, we are going to talk about the Toxicrene and the Maliceptor. In this video, I am going to cover all that I need to cover about the Toxicrene, having played one battle report with him, which you will be seeing this coming Monday. I'm not going to give away what happened. It was against a Grey Knights player because I really don't like Grey Knights, and so I wanted to see if the new Toxicrene, which seems to have been created to counter things like the Dread Knight and the Riptide and other walker monstrous creatures, and see if it could do its job well. And so we're going to talk in these two videos. First one about the big Venom Thrope, the Toxicrene, and then the second one at the link below will be in the MiniWarGaming Vault, and that will be talking about the Maliceptor, the new psychic monstrosity, which I also played in a game just yesterday actually, also against Grey Knights, and I'll talk about my thoughts about that. The things we're going to cover are, first off, just talking about the model itself, this huge model with these huge tentacles and what I think, talking about the assembly and painting of it, and then how I felt that it will do and how it will change the meta of the game a bit. We're going to talk about the rules. You can actually get the rules for free for both of these models at blacklibrary.com. So it's the first time in a long time at least that Games Workshop has released any rules for models for free. And it makes sense because there doesn't look like they're going to be updating the Tyranid Codex because it doesn't really need to be updated. It wasn't that long ago that it received its hardcover version, and there's still other books like the Necrons and the Blood Angels that first need their new hardcover book to get them up to date. But instead, these models are getting their rules first off for free, and then also in the new supplement that's been coming out, the Shield of Baal, the Leviathan series. It's like the campaign supplement for the Tyranids. But you can get them for free if you go to blacklibrary.com, go to the digital edition or digital downloads area where you normally see the FAQ and errata, and right there you'll see downloads for these two, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see them for all the new models that come out over the next couple of weeks as well, instead of a new book, which I think is great because you need to get the rules somehow. And when I found out they're just going to be in the White Dwarf and that you had to buy the White Dwarf in order to get it, I thought a lot of people are going to miss that. And even though you can go back and get the digital edition of the White Dwarf, not everybody has access to that. And so that could cause some confusion and some problems, and people are just going to leak the rules anyway. So I'm glad they got around that. So first off, what do I think about the model itself? Obviously, this model is huge. It's on the large monster base, not the regular large base. And it's roughly the size of a Tyranifex or Turvagon in mass. It's a little smaller than that, except it has these tentacles. Now when it comes to assembly, Ash is actually the one that assembled these for me. I've got two Maliceptors and two Toxicrenes, and they come in the same kit, so you buy one kit that makes one or the other. The main thing, he said it went together just fine. You only need to really make sure you use the right legs, because there are two different sets of legs, and with these big tendrils, if you put the wrong legs on, then the tendrils will actually be down. Like it'll force the model to look down, and then they'll not, as you can see, they just barely, you can barely put it on the ground as it is right now, And so if they were pointing down, that would make the model completely unusable. So it assembled fine. He painted up really fast just with airbrushing, so it's not like it's a super high Golden Demon level painting job. But you know what, with my Tyranids, this fits in great because it's more about the swarm and just getting it to blend in. So I think the model itself looks great. I love the look, I love the tentacles, I love the Cthulhu kind of thing. Not that I'm a Cthulhu fan or anything like that, but I just like it. I like how they've departed from that 1980s look of Alien and really kind of cheesy, big smiles on the monsters to this new look. And I've also seen like the new Zone Throat models and Venom Throat models. I think they're going in the right direction for the look, just to kind of establish it as their own thing. And the big thing though, this model is really annoying because look at it from the bottom and you'll notice how far out these spikes go. In fact, if I take another model and just put it right here, you can see that those spikes basically go out the equivalent of another large monstrous base. And you can see it on both sides. So it's effectively on the table taking up the space of 3 of these bases, except that these have no gameplay significance whatsoever. Like if this guy was behind cover right up to here, and that's all you could see, you wouldn't be able to shoot at him. You can't just shoot at it when you can see little things sticking out. And so they don't provide any, it's not like in a vehicle where they would fire from this point or this could count as part of its hull. They have no game functional purpose whatsoever. And so what I found, and what you're gonna find, is that they really get in the way. If you've ever played with the Necron Wraiths, with whip coils, you know what I'm talking about. And lots of other models too have this kind of problem, but this one is particularly bad. So as much as I like the look of the model, it is a pain on the field because you charge this in. In the game that I played, he charged in and a group of Hormagaunts charged in a unit as well. And it got kind of hairy as I tried to move the Hormagaunts into the fight and these tentacles got in the way. So I'm not a big fan of these. I think I wish that they were either up or smaller or something that doesn't make their footprint this big. Now Games Workshop claims they're a model creating company first and a gaming company second, and this model kind of shows that. Having said all of that, I think the Toxicrene makes an excellent addition to the Tyranid forces. It fills up a heavy support slot, and it has a function that we don't really have much in the Tyranid Codex, and that is to basically counter high toughness and lots of wound models, such as the Riptide, the Wraith Knight, or the Dread Knight. Those are the main things that I can think of, or multi-wound elite squads, such as Purifiers or Knob squads or whatever happens to be. Because the Toxicrene, well, it has a few rules. Like I said, you can get these for free at blacklibrary.com. So I just printed it off and now I have access to it. I also bought the White Dwarf magazine for it too, so it can be on my iPad, and I know that was before I realized that they were going to be putting it out for free. So basically, it has a stat line you'd expect from a monstrous creature with toughness 6, has 5 wounds, but it has a 4-up armor save. So it's a little unfortunate that it is not better protected. Most of the monstrous creatures that we see in the Tyranid Codex are 3-up armor saves, except for the Tyrannifex, which is a 2-up armor save. So having a monstrous creature that's a 4-up armor save, that's like the Hivecrone or Harpy, but they at least have the advantage of being flying monstrous creatures, really makes it more susceptible to a lot more weapons. Heavy bolters, for example, are actually going to be effective at taking down the Toxicrene. Now, what it lacks in its armor save, it does make up for in cover saves. Because the Toxicrene, basically in its lore, it is surrounded by this cloud of spores, the sentient spores, and that provides it the Shrouded special rule. So it always has Shrouded. So in night fighting situations, it's going to be having a minimum of 4-up cover. Stick it in trees, because it's a monstrous creature, not a vehicle. You'll always have a 3-up cover, except of course against flamer weapons like templates or anything that ignores cover. But for the most part, when things are shooting at it, such as heavy bolters, it'll have a minimum of a 5-up cover save. So that is a bit of a redeeming quality, especially when it's mixed with other terrain, or if you always have a unit of gaunts in front of it to shield it, then you'll find that works just fine. On top of that, it has other biomorphs that make it really useful, such as lash whips. And that's of course what these things are modeled to be. Lash whips give Tyranid models +3 initiative, which brings its initiative from the normal initiative of 2 or 3, in this case it's 3 of the Tyranid monstrous creatures, and brings it up to a 6. Now why this is so significant is because of what it does in close combat. And that is that it has the poison 2+ special rule, and hypertoxic. Now the poison 2+ is just as a universal special rule. It just means in close combat, regardless of the toughness of the target, it will be wounding it on 2+. And if it so happens to have a strength higher than the toughness, in this case its strength is 5. So if it's going against toughness 4 or lower creatures, or infantry or whatever, then it gets to re-roll that 2+. Now this helps offset its low weapon skill of 3. I don't know if I would have said that it should have a higher weapon skill. I know I get frustrated easily because of the weapon skill of the Moloch, the Carnifex, and the Tranifex, all for having these weapon skills of 3. They're supposed to hit hard, especially the Carnifex. But with a weapon skill of 3, you're most always hitting on 4s and hardly ever on 3s, unless the unit fails its fear test. And even sometimes on 5s against the unit. And when you have only a few attacks that are hitting really hard, you don't want to be hitting on 4s. You want to be hitting on 3s to make sure those attacks get through. And so unfortunately the Toxicrene, for the most part, unless you can get a good paroxysm off, or the unit fails their fear test, is going to be hitting on 4s. Now it makes up for that a little bit because it has a base number of attacks of 6, which means you're going to be getting at least 3 attacks in on average. If it charges, you'll have 7 attacks on the charge, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll be able to get more than 3 or 4. So then it has a poison 2+. Hypertoxic is simply the same as the Bone Swords, which is that on a 6, it causes instant death. And this is where it really shines, because in close combat, it is a monstrous creature, which means it is AP2. Now, against the things that it seems to be made to counter, such as the Riptide, the Dread Knight, or the Wraith Knight, its initiative 6 is going to allow it to attack first. And even though it's only going to hit on 4s, it's going to be wounding on 2s. It won't be re-rolling those against those larger creatures because its strength is going to be equal to or less than the toughness of what it's fighting. But hitting a wounding on 2s is nice. It's AP2, which is going to ignore most of their saves. They're going to have some invulnerable saves in there. But those are going to be a lot harder. And then if you get lucky and you roll some 6s, which isn't too hard to do if you get enough attacks in, then if they fail their invulnerable save against that, it totally destroys that creature. And of course, it's going to work better if you can back it up with something to give it a hand, either to give the paroxysm against whatever it's targeting so it can hit on 3s, or just some extra hitting power, or to soften up whatever it is you're charging with an Exocrine firing at it, for example. So there's always synergy that you want to do. You never want to look at a creature just in a vacuum by itself. It has some other special rules too, like it has the Choking Cloud, which allows it to fire a large blast, poison 2+, ignores cover, hypertoxic weapon. And so let's just go over that really quickly. Large blast within 12 inches, so not too far, but still it's going to be moving forward and trying to get in close combat anyway, so it's pretty good range. A large blast, which is 2+ poison. That is going to be really good against a lot of things. It's going to be good just against low level, it could be Imperial Guardsmen, or it could be Orc Boys, or even Space Marine Terminators, or just regular tactical Marines. A large blast is going to get a lot of hits in. It's going to make up for his low ballistic skill of 3, and it's going to poison them on a 2+, which means he's going to get lots of wounds in against that. The disadvantage of the shooting attack is it has no AP, so it won't be as nearly effective against the 2-up saves or 3-up saves. And the instant death only really matters if they fail that. So that's not going to be your way to kill the Dread Knight. You might get lucky, of course, but it's just not going to be the way to do it. It does ignore cover, which is an added bonus, and it has the hypertoxic, doing instant death. And it also has predatory sentience, which means against a vehicle that is either open-topped or has already lost a hull point earlier in the game, it gains Armor Bane. Now it's only strength 3, so strength 3 Armor Bane, that might do something. Even against Orc trucks with their armor of 10, you still need to roll a 7 just to glance it. So it's not really going to be meant for that, but it's an added bonus if it happens to scatter and partially cover a vehicle. Maybe you'll get lucky and do a glancing or penetrating hit against that as well. Who knows? Now the last thing I want to talk about for it is it has a couple other biomorphs. It of course has we already talked about the Choking Cloud and Lash Whips, but it also has Toxic Miasma and Acid Blood. Now Acid Blood is just your standard biomorph for Tyranids in the sense that whenever it takes an unsaved wound, then whoever caused that wound does an initiative test. If they fail it, they take a Strength 5 AP2 ignore cover hit. So it's just a little bit of retribution. That's not a big deal. The one that is kind of cool is a Toxic Miasma. The Toxic Miasma is something I never use with Tyranids because it's just something that doesn't come up too often. All the Toxic Miasma is that it's a one-use only weapon that can be used in close combat at initiative 1. And what it does is it affects all the models in base contact. Well, not specifically the models. It hits the unit a number of times equal to the number of models in base contact. So, of course, you're hurting the ones that are closest, so it's typically going to be affecting the models in base contact. The Toxic Miasma is a poison 4+ hit against them at Initiative 1. So assuming that it is still alive at Initiative 1, once per game, it can unleash this kind of little explosion of toxicness, and everything in base contact is essentially getting wounded on a 4+, assuming it's not a vehicle, of course, which it will be useless against. Now, here's where it's kind of cool. The hypertoxic rule that the Toxicrene has says any hit inflicted by this model that has the poisoned special rule, and it says including any hits caused by its choking cloud, so it includes its shooting attack, gains the instant death special rule on a to wound roll of 6. Well, the Toxic Miasma would be a hit caused by that model, and it has a poison special rule, poison 4+ in this case, not 2+. So the Toxic Miasma would actually be insta-killing on a 6 as well. Now, some might argue that for maybe they're thinking that the rules are not written with that intent, but it's pretty clear. It says any hit by this model, and the Toxic Miasma counts as the model at doing an attack at Initiative 1 that hits everything in base contact with poison 4+. So that is the way that, unless there's an FAQ that comes out where they're like, oh, no, we didn't want the Toxic Miasma included in that, it seems like that is part of it as well. And what other reason would you give it Toxic Miasma anyways? Because it's a biomorph that's not usually something you're going to upgrade to, because it doesn't usually end up having a lot of use, especially because it's only one use only. So the Toxicrene is going to be it's going to be efficient against mobs of creatures with its large blast 2+ poison. It's going to be good against multi-wound squads like paladins or knobs or centurions, anything there's more than one model and they have lots of wounds. And it'll also be great against the Dread Knights and Riptides if you make sure you back it up so that it's not left on its own to get shot to death, because it does have the weakness there. Where it's going to be pretty useless, of course, is against vehicles. At Strength 5, you're going to have to smash in order to really do any damage to a vehicle. And that only allows you to do one attack instead of its regular 6 or 7 if it happens to be the one charging. Against walkers, it'll be totally useless, and just like most Tyranid creatures are, except for Carnifexes, of course, especially with Crushing Claws. And it has no way to really be useful. So it doesn't seem like it's been created to try to go up against vehicles. So it still doesn't really... I know it has that whole gains armor bane, but we already talked about how that's only strength 3, so it's more just like maybe it'll do something. And that's only if the vehicle's already damaged to begin with. We have other things that deal with vehicles, and you can go and use those instead. So that is my take on the Toxicrene. Perhaps I will have different opinions once I've played with it even more. Of course, this is just an initial review based on the model, how it looks, and how it's played in the one game that I've had it in, against one of my biggest nemesis, the Grey Knights. You'll see that game on Monday, so stay tuned for this Monday for those battle reports. So thank you for watching the Shadows in the Warp, and now go ahead and click the link below to go and watch the video about the Maleceptor. I love this model, and I love how it played and all the potential it does have. That, of course, is for MiniWarGaming Vault members, and if you are not a Vault member, you can still click it and get a free 7-day trial to try out the Vault. I think you'll be surprised by how much you like it. There are so many extra things in there. For every battle report we put out for free, there's one in the Vault. There's painting tutorials almost every single day of the week from Monday to Friday that Chris puts up. Some of them quick tips, some of them more in-depth. And there's just tons of content in there that you'll have instant access to. Even while you're just a trial member and have paid nothing, you'll have access to everything, including our narrative campaigns and all of that. It also supports us. It is what allows us to keep the lights on, pay our employees, pay ourselves, buy our models, and do everything else that we need to do. So we really appreciate the Vault members. So go ahead, click the link below to watch for the Maleceptor, and then hopefully, assuming that a certain baby doesn't arrive, as my wife is expecting and is due next week, hopefully I'll have time to give you a review on this. Eventually I will do a review on this, but it might not be next week. I hope for it to be next week. And this is, of course, the new Tyrannicide. And it can also be created as a Sporocyst. So I have a bunch of these I'm going to be creating up, featuring in battle reports, and then also doing a Shadows in the Warp. But I wanted you to get this video so you can at least have this to tide you over until I can do more in-depth reviews of everything. Thanks for watching. Happy wargaming.